Okay, thank you for joining everybody from close and from far. We're holding here in the Gemara in Mesechta Megillah, Daf Hatzvi-Bais 16b, and if you have the art scroll, it's 16b4. And we're explaining the very last pasuk of the Megillah. If you ever want to say in Hebrew you're doing something really long, you say, I got a whole Megillah to tell you. Yep. Here we're coming up to the end of the explanation of the Megillah, of the Gemara. It says, Mordechai the Jew, Mishneh lamelech Achashverosh. He was second in command to King Achashverosh. Gadol HaYehudim, great among the Jews. Why is that important for everyone to know? Why does it have to be part of the Megillah? V'rotzu l'Rechav, accepted by most of his brethren. Doidesh toiv li'amai, he seeked the good of his people. V'doiver, he sought the good of his people. V'doiver shalom l'chol zarai, and he spoke peace to all of their seed. Like we brought yesterday, we learned the Gemara. What does it mean he was accepted by most of his brethren? But I say that most of my neighbors like me, it's not a very good thing.
I wouldn't be too happy.
And so we learned yesterday what the Gemara said, that some of the Sanhedrin separated themselves from Mordechai, because Mordechai was no longer learning Torah exclusively. Now he was also involved in running a kingdom, taxes, agriculture, vaccine mandates, going through the whole works, the CDC, the budget, the government shutdown. This is what Mordechai, the great Talmid Chacham, is busy with. And they were saying, Mordechai, someone else could do this. Mordechai, as the Rabbi explains, actually had a different attitude of these members of Sanhedrin, and most of the Sanhedrin agreed with him, which was that it's impossible to trust Achashverosh. He's the same evil person in the beginning, he's the same evil one now. And he's a person which you cannot trust, you always got to be on guard. And if Hashem placed me in the palace, it's always to be there to make sure that Achashverosh does not somehow revert to what he was doing before. Who knows? Now he likes the Jews, he might one day make another decree against the Jews. There's always palace intrigues going on. Achashverosh was very impulsive, very fickle. So Mordechai had to always stay in the palace, to always be there to advocate and to be there for the Jews. So therefore, Mordechai had to stay in the palace. And it says that Mordechai was so great that many of the kings from the area, from whole surrounding areas, as it says the Targum, were trembling, were scared of Mordechai. Nafal pachad Mordechai aleim. And at that point in davening, they added on a bracha at the very end of Sin Shalom, and we're going to have in the next parak in the Gemara, it's going to go through the entire Shemona Esrei, how we know to say all 18 brachas. They added on the bracha at the very end of Shemona Esrei, Baruch atah Hashem, hamevarech es Amma Yisrael b'Shalom. Because what's the very last word of the Megillah? Sorry about that.
Shalom, right?
It says, V'doiver Shalom l'chol zarei. Mordechai spoke peace to all of the seeds, all of the descendants of the Jews. And Malachim saw that, the angels saw that, and they made a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem, hamevarech es Amma Yisrael b'Shalom. Blessed are you, Hashem, who blesses the Jewish people with peace. And once the angel said that, so then the Jewish people, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, which Mordechai was one of them, they instituted as part of davening. Hamevarech es Amma Yisrael b'Shalom. Again, over here in the Megillah, we mentioned this in passing, that the Megillah, in a very hinted way, does speak something derogatory about Achashverosh, that Achashverosh was very great. All the acts of power and might of Achashverosh. And in the previous passage it says, Achashverosh.
Do it? Huh? Somebody else is taking over.
Shalom Aleichem, Reb Label. So in the previous pasuk, it says that Achashverosh made a tax on all the peoples. His greatness was, he wasn't a beloved king. He was a king who was very tough. He put taxes, he showed people the stick. And that was the greatness of Achashverosh. And they were hiding over here in the Megillah some words that could be to a discerning eye saying the real truth about Achashverosh. This is, besides for the reasons of Chassidus, why Hashem's name is not mentioned in the Megillah, because the greatness, the miracle of Purim comes from such a high place in godliness. We're 16b for. Such a high godliness, which is beyond Hashem's name. And that's why Purim will never be forgotten, even when Mashiach comes. It will be so important even then. But in addition to that, in a similar vein, we could give two other reasons why Hashem's name is not mentioned in the Megillah. Simple reasons. One, as it says over here, it was all written written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. Meaning this entire Megillah that's written by Mordechai and Esther is going into the hands of the Jewish people's enemies. Now, if it has Hashem's name inside of the Megillah, what they would do is they would substitute the name of Hashem for the name of their deities, the name of their gods, the name of their idols. That's what they would do. And so Hashem did not want, God forbid, in the Megillah, or the Chachamim, Mordechai and Esther did not want there to be the names of idols. And Hashem saved the Jews and would say, and this idol, this deity saved the Jews. In order not to have the Chil Hashem, that's a creation of Hashem's name, Mordechai and Esther did not put the Hashem's name in the Megillah. So the chroniclers of Media and Persia should not substitute Hashem's name for a name of a deity. That's one reason why the Megillah does not have Hashem's name. In addition, another reason is the Megillah was not only written for the Jewish people. Mordechai Esther wrote it, as we say, also for the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. Media. If they have Hashem's name written in the Megillah, it's like almost having Hashem's name written on a newspaper. What happens to the newspaper at the end of the day? It's thrown in the garbage.
Yeah.
You use the
Fish. My grandmother lived in Crown Heights on Eastern Parkway, and it always bothered her whenever signs would go up on the street or have a picture of the Rebbe on it. She says these signs get thrown away after. It's not nice to have a picture of the Rebbe get thrown out like this. All right, so Mordechai and Esther, if it would have Hashem's name, it would not, the Megillah would be copied over in the chronicles of Persia and Media, and eventually it will be thrown out. My father, when he was in Richmond, Virginia, and he was learning with a certain student on campus, there's a shliach there. So one thing the student did not understand was, I really don't get something. He says, we finish learning something, you take the sefer, you take the book, and you give it a kiss. Why? Because the book is written by Chachamim, by Hashem, it's Torah, it's holy. He says, my professor, I have a lot of respect for him, very smart person. He wrote a big fat textbook, and we use it every single day during his class, and we have to review it. And at the end of the day, I can put it on the floor and step on it, and my professor can step on it, and no one's going to say anything. Like, why do you have to give such reverence for the Torah? Right? It's something that perhaps from a non-Jewish viewpoint, you don't get it. It could be the king's decree. So the Megillah will be copied and has Hashem's name in there. It could be desecrated, be thrown out. So that's another reason why Mordechai and Esther did not put Hashem's name in the Megillah.
Well, my father noticed actually that Christians who bring their Bibles into the bathroom, they don't think of it.
That's right. Right. The idea of Kedusha, holiness, is only something that the Jewish people are able to understand. Another pshat, this is what's called the Purim Torah. You know, the Purim Rabbi spoke about, you know, the sharp, the person, the man or the boy with a sharp wit. And he asks, why does it say that Mordechai was beloved to most of his brethren? Why not all of his brethren? Besides for the answer of the Gemara. What's another answer? And on the spot he answered, because Mordechai instituted 4 mitzvahs in Purim. One of them is Matanas Lavyonim, gifts of money to the poor. The Gvirim, the rich people, didn't like him for that. So therefore, only most of his brethren actually liked him. Most of the Sanhedrin agreed with Mordechai and Esther that Mordechai belonged in the palace. And most of them did not separate themselves from him. It was only a small minority, which we have to respect and understand and appreciate, and in truth, strive to be like the minority as well. Saying that as great as everything is, you're saving lives, you're doing something, but you have to know in Yiddishkeit, if you're doing something good, a lot of times you have to give up something for it. Even something good, you might have to have Mesiras Nefesh and give up something for that.
It's like the Rabbi was a great rabbi. It was remarkable. He managed to write anything. He was, a finance, minister to, just how did he have the time?
How did the Barbanel have the time? How did the Rashba have the time?
How did the Rambam?
How did the Rambam have the time?
Yeah.
In Israel, I'll bring this up on the screen. And if Yassi's here, he could. Yassi's not here right now. There's a bill in Israel was around. They don't make it anymore, but it's called the Rambam. When Israel moved from the lira to the shekel, and so they made a bill here. You can see it on the screen now. Called the Rambam bill. It was 100, I think, or 1,000 shekel. It's a $250 bill. 1,000 shekel. They wanted to make a chashuv prestigious, and had a likeness of the Rambam. So first of all, we don't know what the Rambam looked like. Any likeness we have today of the Rambam is based totally off artist perceptions, and depending where the artist was. And this is made by an Egyptian artist, hundreds of years after the Rambam died. He looks like a Muslim scholar. Obviously, it can't be the Rambam. He doesn't have payas.
Well, maybe his face is hiding under his turban.
He doesn't have payas, unfortunately. It looks like a Muslim scholar because that's what he envisioned him.
He was Lubavitcher in Golis.
Lubavitcher and Golis. No, we didn't have the. And in addition to that,
Did he wore that at that time?
that's what Muslim scholars at that time wore. What the Rambam wore, we don't know. In Cordoba, there's a statue of the Rambam.
Yeah, there is.
Statue of Rambam. He looks like a very tall, to say, professor. Here's a statue of the Rambam in Cordoba, Spain.
Where he came from? He came from Cordoba, Spain.
See that image.
He was born in Spain,
Yeah.
The Rambam was born in
He
Spain.
came from.
And here's another likeness. I think the UN made another one. This is what he looks like over here. It's all imagination. For us, what's important about the Rambam is what he wrote, and that's where he really is, not what he looked like.
And he came from a family of Dayanim. Cordoba, Spain. He was descended from Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. He had Chassidic.
Almost like you.
Yeah.
But the Rebbe was actually not happy that they put the likeness of the Rambam. The Rebbe says that perhaps the only consolation is we don't know what the Rambam looked like, and this is definitely not a drawing of the Rambam. So, but a dollar bill gets thrown out, gets thrown on the street, right? Or gets burned eventually. It's not respectful for someone like the Rambam. In Israel, they wanted to make a postage stamp with the Alter Rebbe, his picture on it, and the Rebbe said they shouldn't do it because a postage stamp, after it's mailed, the envelope gets thrown out. Just not respectful.
You can't use it again according to law.
he gets stabbed over too.
Correct. It's not respectful for that. Now the Gemara will bring from where we see that Mordechai was actually, you could say, demoted, not demoted, but in importance. Several members of the Sanhedrin left him. Several of his colleagues shunned him. So we're going to see that, and we're going to learn several lessons. And from here till essentially the end of the parak, we're going to talk about the importance, the greatness, and the specialty of limud ha-Torah, Talmud Torah, learning Torah. It's greater than kibbut avim, honoring your parents. We're going to see that about Yaakov Avinu. It's greater than building the Beis Hamikdash. We'll see that with Ezra.
That's really amazing. It's greater than that yet.
It's not bigger than helping the Yid pull his wagon out of the mud.
Right. When someone had, like this a famous story, it's when someone's obviously and it's going to say it's greater than life and death. We're not talking about life and death of on the spot. It means if someone's drowning and you're learning Torah, you stop what you're doing and you rescue them. We're talking about stopping what you're doing and for an ongoing life and death. For example, Mordechai being in the palace was a issue of life and death. But he stopped, but he had to interrupt at least the quality of his learning, as the Rabbi Yonasan just understands, in order to help with that.
Look at the Rebbe. How much more could he have learned if he didn't give dollars, if he didn't make a farbrengen every week, to sit there and pour out his heart and people stuff?
Exactly.
But he did.
The Rebbe visited camp 2 years in a row, 1956 and 1957. The first 2 years that the camp was there. In 1958, they asked the Rebbe to come visit the camp again. And the Rebbe didn't. Only in 1960, the Rebbe visited, and he said it's a special thing in honor of 200 years of the Istalkus passing of the Baal Shem Tov. But the Rebbe did not go again. And they asked the Rebbetzin, like maybe you could speak to the Rebbe to get him to come visit camp again. And the Rebbetzin said, as I heard from Rabbi Darren, the Rebbe slept in general very little every single night. Right? The light when the Rebbe would be in his room, 1978, 77, all the time, the light will go off for 15 minutes a night, sometimes 30 minutes. The Rebbe slept very, very little. Now, exactly how much, we don't know. How much, and it's none of our business either. but very little. And while the Rebbe was driving to camp and back, when was that? I don't know, a 3-hour drive, let's say, back then on those roads. And one of the times he went, there was a flat tire, and I think they were delayed for 15 minutes. And the Rebbe took with him Sfarim and was learning in the car. But the Rebbetzin said that little bit of sleep that he gets every night, he's giving up or cutting down in order to make up for the time that he didn't learn, that he was going on the way traveling in the car to the camp and from the camp.
Wow.
So, meaning the Rebbe can't go. It's asking too much for him to go. So it's a very big deal. And the day the Rebbe went to the oil, the Rebbe didn't sleep the night after at all.
I had the first time I heard this about 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
The last one, the second to last one, 1970.
Yeah.
But he didn't get dinner, then he hung over, he slept there all night.
And he was fresh. And the Rebbe was back at 8:30 in the morning usually.
He was seeing people all night.
And that was fresh back a few hours later in 770, especially the day of Kriyas Torah. Obviously, it's a Rebbe beyond human koyach, beyond human strength. Yes.
Altogether, I can't understand. Like, you have fight sections, sometimes sections, Rebbe family. Who's going to be the next Rebbe? I think to myself, sounds like a real honor, but if you're a real Rebbe, it's a lot of work. Why would anybody want to fight for that position?
The Rebbe was a Moshe Rabbeinu, and then there's a Rebbe who was like a Nasi of a Shevet, a leader of a tribe. It's a lot different than a Ray Yisrael, someone who's neshama includes every single neshama of every single person, the extension of the Moshe Rabbeinu of that generation. Or a Rebbe was like a Nasi, a leader of a Shevet, of a tribe. We're great tzaddikim, great people. It's very interesting. I was reading a farbrengen of the Rebbe from the year 1945. Before the Rebbe was a Rebbe, there was a yeshiva student. His name was Rabbi Weingarten. He wrote his diaries. He wrote many, many detailed diaries, like every single thing that will go on in 770, every farbrengen that went on. It's fascinating stuff going on. Like, you imagine the whole Lubavitch fitting into a room this size over here. It was very intimate. When the Rebbe would speak, he would, and there would be people would interrupt him in the middle. He's almost like a friend. Wasn't a Rebbe yet.
Yeah,
1945. Actually, no, this is from 1940. Yeah, 1945. Yes. And one thing the Rebbe said over there, and one of the farbrengens that he wrote down was that a Rebbe is not made into a Rebbe. From when he's born, he already has the ability to be a Rebbe. Something very, very unique. And there are a few examples, but from the time the person is born, they're already you could see in them and they're already fit to be a Rebbe. It's not that they can become a Rebbe later on in life.
You have to give him Thomas. So I had a friend, Seish guy from Europa.
Yeah.
He said, so when are you guys going to get normal? When are you going to make a new Rebbe? I said, listen, the Rebbe was once interviewed by a reporter from the New York Times.
Yeah.
Who asked him, how could you take on yourself the responsibility to answer questions like do people get married or not, do you have operations or not, or business? So how can you take such a responsibility? So the Rebbe answered him, he said, because when I don't know, I said I don't know. What was that? So that means when he answered, he did
know.
He did know. So I told this friend of mine, you find me such a candidate, I'll consider him.
Except for one time, I've never asked actually from anybody bracha for my health. It's not been a land up issue with brachas anyhow from people. The reason why is I never want the doctors to take credit for somebody's bracha. I want to see how good those doctors are.
Okay, so let's read the Gemara inside. Amar Rav Yosef says Rav Yosef. Gadol Talmud Torah, Yoser Matzalas Nefashos. This is on 16b4, top of the second column. Learning Torah is even greater than saving lives. The Meikara, because initially, when it lists the Jewish leaders who returned to Eretz Yisrael, returned to Israel, before Mordechai, now Mordechai obviously went to Eretz Yisrael, says Koresh, the king, which was before Achashverosh, he let the Jews rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And many Jews returned to Eretz Yisrael. And then we had the story, he was walking in the market in Shushan, and he says, hey, why is the market empty? And he told him, King, it's your fault. You let all the Jews go back to Israel. And he sent out a decree, whoever went to Israel could stay, whoever didn't yet leave the border of the country cannot go. And then he stopped letting the Jews building the Beis HaMikdash. The Samaritans wrote a Ksav Sitna, said it was Haman's son Shimshi, who was actually the author of it. And they wrote an accusation against the Jews. They're building the Beis HaMikdash in order to rebel. And they stopped letting the Jews build the Beis HaMikdash. A few years later, a year or two later, he's dead. Koresh dies. And now Achashverosh is a king. And then trouble starts brewing. And Mordechai goes from Eretz Yisrael back to Babel. So in the first time which Mordechai goes to Eretz Yisrael, during the times of Koresh, so this is about 2 years before Achashverosh becomes king. So in Ezra, we'll see the pasuk inside, the first inside, it lists the Jews who went back to Eretz Yisrael. Eila b'nei Medina, these are the sons of the children of the province, ha'olim mishvi ha'goyla, which left the captivity, asher hagman Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel Bavel, which were exiled to Babylonia by Nebuchadnezzar. And they returned to Jerusalem and each man to his city. And they came with Zerubbabel, where Zerubbabel was a grandson of Yechaniah the king, and he was the one who led the movement of the Jews to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And here are the list of people who came: Yeshua, Nehemiah, which is a sefer in Tanakh called Nehemiah, Sraya, Re'elia, and Mordechai Bilshan. Mordechai, the Bilshan means the translator, the linguist, the polyglot, the one who could speak many languages. Mispar Bidvar Yechum Bana, these are the Jews who went up to build the Beis HaMikdash during the times of Koresh. It lists Mordechai, says the Gemara. Chashav Leila Mordechai Basar Dalit. It counts Mordechai as fourth. He's a fifth one, right? It lists Yeshua, Nehemiah, Sraya, Elia, and then Mordechai is a fifth one. So he's counted after four, meaning he's a fifth one. Meaning in order of importance, he was the fifth to most important Jew who went up to with Zerubbabel to Eretz Yisrael. And then Lebasayf, later on, it says, At the end, they list him one later. Because in the beginning it says Hashem Bozer Bavel Yeshua Nechemia Soyer El Mordechai Bilshan. And at the end it says, we're going to go to the book of Nehemiah now, and it says, Ve'ele V'ani. The pasuk, it says, Sanballat, the servant, sent me a message. Gashmu says, you Jews are building a wall. You want to rebel against us. And you have prophets, and now you want to make your own king. And I told them a message, no, we're not rebelling against you. We're not rebelling against a king. You're making this up. And I came, Vani Basi Beshmaya, Ben Dalia, Ben Meitabel, who Utzer, and he was quiet. And he says, Nivaed, where is it? Nivaed El Beis Elikim Al Techa Heichal Niskadas Heichal Kibar Mergecha V'Laila Bayim Lehargecha. For some reason, it gave me the wrong parak over here. Let's go to parak Zayin 7:7. And this is when they're building the Beis HaMikdash. Eile b'nei Medina. These are the children. These are the Jews. Okay. These are the Jews. Which returned from a Nebuchadnezzar. Now let's go. Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Ramya. That's the four we had before. Then it says Nachmani, guy named Nachman, and then Mordechai Bilshan. Mordechai is number 6 in this list. This is when they're building the Beis HaMikdash. After Darius, Esther's son, lets them rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. So in Ezra, over here, when Koresh let them build the Beis HaMikdash before the story of Purim, the short-lived one, Mordechai is counted as number 5, right? Yeshua, Nehemiah, Yisrael, Elia, then Mordechai, Bilshan, and in Nehemiah, which is when they're building the Beis HaMikdash, after the story of Purim, and now Mordechai was already second to the king. It says these are the ones who went up, and Yeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Ramya, Nachman, and then Mordechai Bilshan. Mordechai is number 5, so he was demoted by one after he became second to the king, after he became viceroy, meaning he no longer had the same, you could say, prestige in the Sanhedrin like he had before. Why? He had to give something up in order to save the Jews.
Were any of those others also the Sanhedrin?
Yeah, they were all part of Sanhedrin.
So they all know the 70 languages. So
why is Mordechai called the Bilshan? You're saying, why specifically was he? Good question. It's a good question. Maybe because he was the one who was famous for using his skills to trap Bigson and Seresh. So Mordechai was now number 5 instead of number 4, and number 6 instead of number 5, because during these 2 time periods, that's when the whole episode of the Megillah happened. Mordechai was not able to learn Torah in the same way because he was busy saving lives, and therefore, by the sages, he went down from his level of importance. I'll do quickly the next one, and then I'll go to some explanations of the Rabbi on the Megillah. Amar Rav, says Rav, Shmuel bar Marta, studying Torah is greater than building the Beis HaMikdash. And what's the proof? Shekol Zman shebarach ben Uriah kayam loyinicha Ezra lagoyla. Baruch ben Uriah, he was the Talmud Muvak, the greatest student of Yirmiyah.
Wasn't he a sofer?
He was a sofer, correct. He used to write. He wrote down many of Yirmiyah's prophecies, and he was the one who wrote down Eicha, and Eliakim burned Eicha after cutting out Hashem's name from it.
And actually, the Catholics have a book of Baruch, but it's not reliable They added all sorts of different stuff to it.
And so he was, Yirmiyahu is all about, the vast majority of Yirmiyahu is basically a prophet of doom, prophet of what's going to happen with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, Ezra was learning by Baruch ben Neriah. Baruch ben Neriah went into exile with the rest of the Jews. Yirmiyahu stayed in Eretz Yisrael. He went to Mitzrayim, then he got killed, or either he was killed in Mitzrayim, or he went back to Eretz Yisrael and died there, wherever it happened to Yirmiyahu. And Baruch ben Neriah, he went to Bavel. And he was very old and very sickly, and he was not able to return to Eretz Yisrael when they were building the Beis HaMikdash. So Darius lets the Jews rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. That's in the second year of his reign. He was all of 8 years old. And then all the Jews go to Eretz Yisrael. In the second year, they start building the Beis HaMikdash. It took them 4 years to build it. And then Baruch ben Neriah stays in Bavel because he's either too sick. Some say there's other reasons he couldn't go up to Eretz Yisrael. And Yirmiyahu is learning, and Ezra is learning Torah from Baruch ben Neriah. And he missed entire building the Beis HaMikdash, and he stayed there until Baruch ben Neriah passed away in Bavel. And he passed away 1 year after the Beis HaMikdash was completed. So in the 6th year of the reign of Darius, Baruch ben Neriah passed away, and Yirmiyahu, the Beis HaMikdash was completed. Baruch ben Neriah passed away in the next year, in the 7th year, and only then did Ezra, the famous Ezra, go up to the Beis HaMikdash. So he actually was not part of building of the second Beis HaMikdash. Now you can imagine Ezra, he was the de facto leader of the Jewish people, him and Nehemiah together. Even Nehemiah deferred to Ezra. You can imagine Ezra not building the Beis HaMikdash. Ezra did not descend to Eretz Yisrael. And first of all, you think there was no Talmidei Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, no Torah scholars? What about Mordechai? He was teaching hundreds of thousands of Jews. He was teaching the greatest scholars. He was in Eretz Yisrael. But he would not leave Bavel because he had a teacher who was greater than Mordechai, which was Baruch ben Neriah. So even if you have a teacher who can teach you Torah better than a teacher in Eretz Yisrael, he's allowed to go there. So that's also one of the reasons. Only you're not allowed to, if you're in Israel for more than 30 days, you can't leave. Unless you're going to marry a woman, get married, or to learn Torah somewhere outside of Eretz Yisrael. There's nowhere to learn Torah in Eretz Yisrael. But if you have a better Torah teacher outside of Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed to go there. So we see from here that it's more important to build, to learn Torah than even binyan Beis HaMikdash, even building the Beis HaMikdash. In Shulchan Aruch, he brings a Tshuvas Harash. And Rush, the son-in-law of the mayor of Württemberg, the Rush, the father of the Torah.
Yeah, that's my cousins.
Again, yes, one of Dovi's many relatives. And he says, if there's money that's collected for people to learn Torah, meaning to support Torah scholars who are learning Torah, are you allowed to take that money and then somebody has to be freed from prison? Or someone has to be saved. I don't know, they need money quickly to save someone. The money was collected to support Torah study, or to build a shul, or to write a Sefer Torah. Learning Torah, are you allowed to take that money to save someone's life? Let's say not directly saving someone's life, give it to a fund which will save lives. Are you allowed to take the money from one to the other? Because we see from this Gemara, learning Torah is more important than saving lives. Learning Torah is more important than building the Beis HaMikdash. The Taz writes that if it's Mikuach Nefesh Mamish, literally life and death situation going on, nothing gets in the way. That's more important than anything else. Like Rabbi Karp said before, right, when the horse is drowning in the mud, you have to save it. You have to interrupt. Mordechai and his friends, they were learning Torah, but when it came time to save the Jewish lives, Mordechai stopped learning Torah to go to save Jewish lives. And most of the Sanhedrin agreed with him. So we see that's what it actually is. Ezra was not needed to build a Beis Hamikdash. Someone else could have done it. Zerubbabel was there building the Beis Hamikdash. If there was no one else to do it, Ezra would have gone to Eretz Yisrael to build it. Since building the Beis Hamikdash was in other capable hands, so therefore he stayed in Babel to learn Torah, because someone else could have done it. So if you're the only one that's able to save a life, you're the only one that could build the Beis Hamikdash, you have to interrupt your Torah study. So if your money is only money available, you have to give it to save a life. But if there's other money available, then learning Torah comes first. Chassam Sofer adds on, there's many ways to save a Jewish life. And Mordechai chose a way which would interrupt his Torah study, meaning that his Torah study, Hashem shows, was not as important as a Torah study, someone like Ezra or Baruch ben Neriah or other members of Sanhedrin. So Torah is more important than Torah study, but if no one else, Torah is more important than saving lives, but if there's nobody else to do it, then you have to save a life.
I mean, I think like a modern example would be if you are giving tzedakah, to let's say yeshiva in Iran, right?
Yeah.
Now, so more there to be this money is actually for that charity, but suppose what's actually would have been actually God forbid at the time, which should be a program in Iran, if you had them, just like it would be, let's say, on the spot. My goodness, we're gonna have to take this money in order to save. So there can be a distinguishment between exactly like what we said, on the spot saving life and between
Right.
collecting in general.
In 15 minutes we have left. I'm going to try fitting in as much as I could. The biur and many explanations of the Rebbe on the last part of the Megillah, the later part of the Megillah. The Gemara itself sort of skipped a lot, went from place to place. We'll bring in a few beautiful biurim of the Rebbe. This is our last Gemara Shiur for this week, and next week will be a week off, and I'm assuming the week after that as well. All the kids are off. I'm going to weddings in New York. Kids are off, and we'll let everybody have a vacation, not from learning, but from me. And okay, shukran. Thank you. And there's a story of the Rogatchover Gaon. We mentioned him multiple times. The Rogatchover Gaon, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, major Talmid Chacham, a Rav in the city of Dvinsk. From 1916 to 1926, he was actually in Russia. He ran away from World War I. He was one of those few Jews you could really say about him, Torah Minasai. Torah was his life. To the extent of, you could say, almost like, in the days of old, Hanayim, people like this. And the story with him is that after the Frierdiker Rebbe left Russia in 1927, and the Frierdiker Rebbe went to Riga, and the Frierdiker Rebbe called a very large meeting of many rabbanim, many rabbis, gathered them all together to do what we could, and including the Rogatchover Gaon, Meir Simcha, Koyin, Sameach, many other rabbanim, and to help the Jews in Russia financially, legally, every single way we do, physically, to send matzah to them. And one of the things the Frierdiker Rebbe did was make a committee. Everybody and this committee, everyone's responsible for a certain thing. And he asked the Rogatchover Gaon, very prestigious, to be part of this committee. And the Rogatchover Gaon says, everything he answered, everything he said was in Torah terms. He says, I'm sorry, I can't do it. It's machlokes between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi.
But then we pass it like the Bavli?
And we pass him like the Bavli.
I see. It's a general rule, although there are some exceptions therein.
What does that mean? And he explained like this, that it says in Mesechta Brachos, Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis. So let me go to Brachos, Lamed Beis, Amud Beis, while we're here. It says the Chassidim are Rishonim, the first Chassidim, they would daven. It would take them many hours a day to daven. So they will prepare for davening for an hour. We do on Chassidic for an hour. It would take them davening an hour to daven just Shemini Esrei, and then an hour after davening, they would again be misblending. They would like sort of think about the davening. Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, 3 times a day. How many hours a day is that?
3 hours.
9 hours a day they would daven.
Oh, yeah, 9 hours, yeah.
That's a long time to daven every single day.
Only 1 hour on Shemini Esrei?
It'll take them an hour for an Esrei. Now, that's Yeshua ben Levi. Before you daven, you have to wait an hour, and after davening, you have to wait an hour. It says Ach Sadikim Yed L'Shmecha, and the first Chassidim would do that. And so the Gemara asks, since the early pious men would spend 9 hours a day davening, so then Tiferes and Eich Mishtameres, what happened with the Torah? How was the Torah preserved? And how was the work accomplished? So the Gemara says, because they were pious, the Torah was preserved, and the work is blessed. The Yerushalmi takes out one word. Yerushalmi brings the same Gemara. He just takes out the word mishtameres, guarded. And he says, their Torah and their work is blessed. What's the difference of preserved and blessed? Preserved means like a barasul she'ein ma'betipa, you don't lose anything. Blessed means that in a short amount of time, you could accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish in a large amount of time. So according to the Gemara Bavli, the Chassidim were daven for 9 hours a day. Torah they would learn in a short amount of time was able to compensate for all those hours they should have been learning Torah, because the Torah was mispareches, was blessed, according to the Yerushalmi. According to the Bavli, the Torah was not blessed, the work was blessed. A short amount of work was able to bring a lot of parnasa. But the Terasa Mishtameres means was only guarded. They didn't forget anything, but there was no blessing in the Torah. So he says it's a machlokes between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. If you're involved in godly pursuits, but you're not learning Torah during that time, is your Torah blessed during that time? Is your Torah just preserved during that time? So according to the Bavli, it's preserved. According to the Yerushalmi, it's blessed. And we're Ashkenazim, we live halachas like the Bavli. And therefore, the Teras Mishtameres, our Torah will be preserved. And since I'm a person which is Teras Minase, my Torah is my entire life. Therefore, I won't, if the time I take to be involved in this committee, I won't be able to learn Torah. And it could be done by other people. And therefore, he says he can't join the committee of the. Now, this is somebody only on the caliber of the Rogachover Gaon, which the Rebbe. First of all, I think the Rebbe did get smicha from him, because it was put in Hayom Yom in the introduction. The Rebbe received smicha from him. The Rebbe edited it and left it in there. Many letters of the Rebbe to the Rogachover Gaon, already from the age of the Rebbe of I think 15 and 16, the Rebbe is writing letters to the Rogachover Gaon. The way they would write the letters was he wouldn't write a sentence based on what it says in Brachas Lamed Beis, Erev and Pei Beis, according to Marsha, question on what you wrote in that letter. And the Rogachover Gaon would answer with another page full of places to look up. And that's how the letters would go back and forth. And that's how all the Rogachover's letters were. Rebbe has a lot of the Rogachover's style of learning, speaking at great length and clearly, but writing extremely concise.
Did the Rogachover have any children? Or...
Yes. The Rogachover children, grandchildren, I think unfortunately they were all killed in the Holocaust.
The reason why I was wondering is because if his whole life was Torah, I wonder if he had any.
Oh yeah, he had children and grandchildren. Unfortunately, I think they were killed by the Nazis. What? The Rogachover passed away in 1936.
What about his children?
I think they were all killed by the Holocaust. His daughter was definitely killed. What his daughter did do, she took all the Rogachover's writings and she mimeographed them.
Oh wow!
And she started sending them out to America.
Oh, wow!
And she sent them like in the mail. And she finished the last one about 2 weeks before the Nazis came into Latvia and was sent out. And they say she had an opportunity to escape before, but she stayed there to preserve it. So the original writings of those writings of the Rogachover were, I think, destroyed, but the mimeographed all made it to America. But the person, and they were sitting around for about 40 years in America, untouched in someone's attic, until there was somebody, Hashgacha Pratis, met them, and now they're all in Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't touch them for years because they didn't want to ruin them. They're so old. Till they got more modern technology, they're able to decipher them, and now there's a whole institute going through and literally deciphering. You have to, one sentence of the Rabbi Shavar, you can write 3 pages on what he means. So, like the Rabbi Shavar, when he was living under communism in Russia and in Petersburg, or they call it Leningrad then, and they told him he got a letter from the government that he has to pay 2 different types of taxes. And he said, according to halacha, one of them I do have to pay, one of them I don't have to pay. A short while later, he gets a letter that the one he says he doesn't have to pay, we made a mistake, you don't have to pay it. And the Rebbe explained the story, is that because he's a man of Torah, he's a officer of Torah, Torah decides what's happening in the world. So therefore, when he paskins something, that's the way the world, that's the way even a communist government listen to them without them knowing, but that's because Torah paskin that way. So someone in his caliber. So in a similar sense, this would be the difference between Mordechai and his friends. Mordechai is a Yerushalmi, right? Mordechai meaning he was from Sanhedrin, he was from the original people who came from the Anshe Knesset Agdola, and he therefore says that his Torah is blessed, and therefore he won't lose out by being in the king's palace, because he will receive a blessing for saving Jewish lives. And the rest of the Sanhedrin said no. That not the rest, the other members who were Bavlim in Bavel said that, like the Bavli, that your Torah is guarded, but really learning Torah is more important than what you're doing. But we see a tremendous lesson. Mordechai, as great as he was, he left what he's doing in order to help another Jew, save other Jews. And he's willing to put his reputation, his standing, his Torah, everything at risk, just in order to help other Jews physically and even spiritually. And Mordechai went down from being number 5 to being number 6. Sometimes a Jew, it's demanded from us to go help someone else, save a Jewish life. And you could say, it's not for me, I'm going to lose out for my own greatness. I'm going to demote myself. If it's coming like this, when it's come to saving lives, Mordechai did it for sure. Us, when it comes to bring other Jews close to Hashem, for sure have to do it. And Mordechai is there always to be on guard, in the king's palace, to make sure that nothing untoward is happening. The Megillah says that Mordechai, the greatness of Mordechai. What is important for us to know? That Mordechai was great. Mordechai was humble. We said he's like Moshe Rabbeinu, he's very humble. It's written in the Megillah, not for nothing. Why would Mordechai want people to know? Obviously, it sounds like tacitly he wanted it. Why is it important for everyone to know that Mordechai was great and Gadol HaYehudim, great for the Jews? Why is that important for everyone to know? Because everyone should know that although we were in the times of Achashverosh, a person might think to say, listen, I'm in Galus, fart in Galus. Jews moved here to America in the early 20th century. We're fart in Galus. We have to work on Shabbos or send you to public school. And they say, no, look at Mordechai. It doesn't say just Mordechai, Mordechai HaYehudi. Mordechai, the Jew. We said Yehudi is someone who's denying Avodah Zarah, the opposite of what's in the world. He sees a darkness in the world. You should know Mordechai is in the world. Mordechai is second to the king. He's the most powerful person in charge of the armies, in charge of everything. How? And he's a Yehudi, he's Jewish. He walks around with his payas, with his beard, with his tzitzis in the open. Only someone who's a Yehudi could be so great. Even the kingdom, and even the chroniclers, and even the governors, and the officers, and the ministers in Persia media, they knew that. Why is Mordechai so great? Because Mordechai Yehudi, Mordechai is great. Why is Mishneh Lamelech? Why is he second to the king? Because the Yehudi, because he's Jewish, and he's not nispal, he doesn't compromise on any of his values. And Gadol HaYehudim, how is he great among the Jews? Only because he was a Yehudi and he was second to the king. And there's a bitter joke about this, is that when are Jews respect another Jew? Only if the world respects them. If the world doesn't respect them, then they could be a great rabbi, but unfortunately they won't have as much respect. And I can tell you many anecdotes. I'm sure you have many anecdotes. But when they see the world respecting a Jew, suddenly they respect him. Whether it's there's a very famous from radio host, name is Ben Shapiro, and he spoke once in YU, Yeshiva University, and they asked him, the students asked him some very very pertinent for nowadays type of questions. He says, "Why are you asking me this? I'm not a rabbi. You have over here the rabbi in charge of the whole YU. He's right here. Ask him. Why are you asking me?" During Mir Yehudi, the 1970s, when Golda Meir was prime minister, and there were several Brachrim went, got together. What could we do to help the who's a Jew question? And they got 4 very important rabbinical leaders, and they arranged for them to fly to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel in first class, and meet with Golda Meir, talk to her about Mir Yehudi, who is a Jew. Conversion has to be according to halacha, and they went to Eretz Yisrael, and she refused to meet with them. And so they reached out to the American embassy. American embassy called up the prime minister's office, and he says, "Our biggest rabbinical leaders in our country flew to Israel, and you don't even meet them?" Oh, right away they met them. Golda Meir met them the next day, and the first thing they spoke about was, how come it is that in order to meet with you, we have to go through the Gentile government? Why is it that many Jews only respect another Jew if they have prestige by the nations of the world? This is Mordechai Yehudi. Mordechai was respected because he was a Yehudi for who he was. Now, it says Mamar Esther, the words of Esther, everyone kept. It's called Megillah Esther, the Megillah of Esther. Esther was the catalyst behind the Megillah. Esther was the one who asked the Jews write down to the Chachamim, make Purim a Yom Tiv, write down the Megillah, put it as part of Tanakh. Now, the Sanhedrin didn't agree in the beginning, and Mordechai is part of that Sanhedrin, and he also didn't agree that it should be part of Tanakh. And Esther pushed for it, and Esther got her way. And it's called Megillah Esther, because she was the one who pushed for it. In addition, it wasn't Mordechai who decreed about the simcha of Purim, the happiness of Purim, the joy, and the mitzvahs of Purim. It was Esther who did it, as we learned in the Mesechta Megillah. So it's not called Megillah Esther, it's called Megillah, not called Megillah Mordechai, it's called Megillah Esther. The Jews reaccepted the Torah in the times of Achashverosh. It says that Hashem held the mountain over the Jews by Har Sinai, and Hashem said that if you accept the Torah, good and fine. If you don't accept the Torah, here you will be buried. And we learned a mimer together, Kibbutz Yehudim from the Torah. That what it means is that Hashem showed them such great love that there was no way they could say no. Imagine someone showing you such great abundance of love, and I ask you, Dovi, I give you millions of dollars, and then Dovi, could you come? I asked her after, Dovi, could you come be number 10 for $1 million from Mincha? You're not going to say no. I don't give you a choice. I showed you such great love and such great honor. So by Matan Torah, Hashem showed them such great love from above, they couldn't say no. By Purim, that's when they had Mesiras Nefesh, when things were not going good for the Jews, they reaccepted the Torah. So why is it called by the name of Esther? We can understand this. Because according to Chassidus, Kabbalah, the man, the Ish is Mashpia, the giver. The woman is the Mekabel, the recipient. Beruchnias, a man comes from Chachma, a woman from Bina, a man from a woman from Malchus, a man from Zah. The man has HaKadosh Baruch Hu, male, female is Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish people receive from Hashem. To show you that the connection of Hashem and the Jewish people comes from Sa'irus Mamata, a recipient from below. The Jews did teshuvah. That's what Purim was. Purim, we hold the braga from the bottom because the Jews did teshuvah. It came from below the entire Purim, and therefore it came from Esther. And the woman, we can learn a wonderful lesson. The women are the center of the house. The women saved the Jewish people. The women set the tone for what a house is, and the woman set the tone. If a house that we have is going to be a house of light, a house of Torah, she'll ask Mordechai. Esther will ask her husband Mordechai, and he'll go according to the psak of the Torah. But Esther is the one who set the tone, and the women in every generation who saved the Jews then and will continue to save the Jews in the future as well. It's already 12 o'clock, so if everyone is free to go, but I'm going to go through another few very geschmacke, enjoyable biurim of the Rebbe on the Megillah, which will be about another 5 minutes. Mordechai did not bow down. If you look at Rashi over here, it says Esther wrote the Megillah. Let's go back to the Megillah over here. Let's go back to the previous chapter 9, and let's turn on Rashi here. Let's turn on Rashi, show Rashi's commentary, just to show this one Rashi, three words from Rashi. Pasuk Chavtes. And Esther, Queen Esther, the daughter of Abigail, and Mordechai the Jew wrote down all the acts of power to confirm the second Purim letter. Says Rashi in this, the Eskal Toikef, the power. So Rashi says, Tokvish, unless the power of the miracle of Achashverosh, of Haman, of Mordechai, and of Esther. And he does add on as well, in Rashi on the Gemara, let's go to verse 26. It says, the days were called Purim because of the poor, because of the lottery. We had a picture of a poor of a lottery, and according to Chassidic, such a high level of godliness that it's by chance, you could say. And they fulfilled the words of this letter, what they saw, and what happened to them. Rashi says, Maro, what did they see? These deeds. And what happened to them after Achashverosh used as sacred vessels. And Satan came and danced between them. V'haragas Vashti, and killed Vashti. And he goes, what did Haman see? That he was jealous of Mordechai. What happened to Haman? He was hung on the tree. What did Mordechai do? Everyone saw Mordechai did not bow. What happened to them? He became second to the king. What did Esther see? She invited Haman to the feast. What happened? Esther now was given the house of Achashverosh. So what happened? All these great miracles that happened, the power of the miracle. This miracle over here says that a Satan came and killed Vashti. Now, it's a great miracle, fine. But how is that? That's sort of like an anecdote. It's a side thing. It caused that later on, Esther should become the queen. But why does it call it one of the great miracles? Was this so great, the ultimate miracle? The king couldn't sleep at night. I understand this is a great miracle. The king killed Haman. But the fact that the king killed Vashti was Memucham found the king in a moment of anger, and he convinced the king to kill Vashti. Why is that considered to be one of the main aspects of the miracle, as Rashi says over here? So Rashi is giving over here a marvelous attitude to look. And a lot of times when a person looks at a general picture, he could lose sight of the details. Especially, let's say you're in a government, you're making a budget of millions, billions, Congress of trillions. So $1.5 million got lost supporting, putting up a street sign in one corner and got billed $1.5 million by the company, and they sort of overlook that. Oh, you're dealing with so many things. You lose sight of the small things. A Jew who believes in Hashem knows that every single thing that happens, every detail is so important. And a miracle doesn't have to only be when Hashem splits the sea in two. That's not the only time of a miracle. Or that when Og, the king, uprooted a huge mountain, a few miles long, and the termites bit into it and then it collapsed. A miracle is when you see Hashem, Hashkacha Pratis, you see Hashem's hand in everything you do in a small life, in a small light. And that's the same miracle for a believing Jew as much as a miracle of splitting the sea and the 10 makas and the 10 plagues. And so too over here, these miracles, the miracle that Haman was hung on the tree is the same miracle that Vashti was getting killed. How? Let's see that. Remember about what Vashti did? We learned in the Medrash. Vashti was very cruel. And what she did is she had Jewish girls who were maidservants or slaves to her. And she humiliated them, oftenly in very physical, perverse ways, made them be without clothes, serving her. She whipped them, made them eat pork, serve on Shabbat, work only on Shabbos. And these Jewish girls who were slaves to Vashti were unfortunately very abused. Now, obviously, they were not the vast majority of the Jewish people. At that point, Jewish people were still enjoying a relatively peaceful, good life in Babel. However, these Jewish girls were unfortunately suffering, by Vashti. And when when the king got angry at Vashti, so then Vashti was killed. These Jewish girls were saved now from their plight. Rashi tells you that even a few Jewish girls being saved, that is the takfishalness, the greatest miracle. As great as a miracle of the decrees against the Jews being saved and Haman hanging on the tree, and as great of a miracle of splitting the sea, is only a few Jewish girls when they're saved. So every single individual Jew is important, is unique, and that's why Purim will never go away. Purim will always be here forever. Doesn't mean the other Yom Tovim will not be here. It says the other Yom Tovim will be batal, will be nullified, will be so great it's like holding a flashlight in the sun, which is of no importance.
Embarrassing to Vashti, she was being called, to be naked. It's like
correct.
Mida connected,
right. Haman, the decree of Purim was abolished because Mordechai took Jewish kids, was learning Torah with them. He asked them, what psukim did you learn? And he told them, psukim, we have nothing to fear from Achashverosh. Mordechai and his students was teaching them about the laws of Kmitza. There was no Beis HaMikdash being built. They're learning halachas of the Beis HaMikdash. He was showing them how to do Kmitza in the Beis HaMikdash. And they were involved in the learning. These children is what caused the miracle of Purim. And this is Mizaram, the very last word of the entire Megillah is Mizaram, their children. Chozare, all of his children. Torah the fact that Torah will not be gone from the Jewish people, that's a main miracle of Purim. That Torah is permanent. And that will be even when Mashiach comes. And that is the main miracle and will cause the miracle of Purim. And that is, or will be by Purim. So Shekoyach for joining in this journey through the Megillah. And like it says, the explanation of Chassidus, even when Hashem's name is not there in Megillah, we have the essence of Hashem. And every single thing that we do, coming from the 9 days, that Hashem is there, and Mish Hashem before already tomorrow, Mashiach shall come already, and to